Welcome to the 6th season of Faith and Sustainability, a podcast where we continue to explore how our faith traditions inspire us to care for our common home. I'm your tour guide, Leonard Robinson, and together we'll dive into inspiring stories, thought-provoking conversations, and the wisdom that guides us in protecting our common home.
And I'm your co-host, Kat Doyle. Just a reminder that our podcast is made possible through the generous support of Jamie Lanier, the Varlamov Family Foundation, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, St. Francis Services, and Semco Atlanta. Their dedication is more than just about sustainability. It's about bringing us interesting conversations. So, Leonard, who is our conversation with today?
You know, Kat, it's Beth Remmes. She's a passionate advocate for ecological resilience and spiritual renewal. As the Coastal Outreach and Resiliency Coordinator for Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, she works at the intersection of faith, climate justice, and community empowerment, helping coastal congregations prepare for and respond to environmental challenges with compassion and courage. So, let's get this thing started. You know, Beth, how did your faith shape your path into sustainability?
So I was born and raised in Rochester, New York, in the town of Irondequoit on Lake Ontario. And as part of my upbringing, I learned about the Haudenosaunee people and Seneca Nation who are indigenous to that land. I remember hearing stories. In my memory, I was in elementary school at the Nature Center, and we had someone from Seneca Nation tell us about how they gave gratitude before and after a hunt, how every part of the animal was used, right down to the sinew off the bone for bows or lacrosse nets. And there is such reverence in that. And something at a young age just stuck with me that, like, yes, this is how life is supposed to be. Like, we are supposed to have reverence, and communion and kinship with the land, and that nothing shouldn't go to waste, that this is all part of a sacred cycle. And then spiritually, I grew up in the Christian Science Church, and I now attend a Unity Church, which they emerged around the same time in the late 1800s. And in both of those, we are taught that the spark of the divine is in me. And so, learning the passages, Jesus says, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works I do, and greater works than these. It was like going to church, like, when you go to college and you have some professors are like, you start with a 0 and you have to work up to an A. And then there's other professors that, like, you're starting with an A, it's yours to lose. It felt like that, right? Like, I started with the A. Like, there were very high expectations placed on me growing up in that way. But I loved it. And I felt like that was a call that I needed to answer. In addition to, like, the expectation that we would do good works, Christian Science and Unity are also very much focused on the power of prayer and thoughts and feelings. So it's like a constant awareness and maybe even vigilance to stay in alignment, like on a holistic level with the divine.
So I'm hearing you talk about high expectations, and I think all of us who know that God calls us to do this work believe that He holds high expectations. Is sustainability work? Do you think that the expectations are high enough in the faith communities?
I think that for whatever reason, I don't really understand, it is seen as separate. That's why I think the Laudato Si was so groundbreaking as an example of how faith can step into this environmental conversation. When Pope Francis wrote, we need to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, and making those connections. So again, I don't understand. Because I never grew up with that story of separation, I always thought that it was connected. If I'm growing up in a faith tradition that even my thoughts have power, my prayers have power, and we all influence the world around us, how could anything I do not impact the life around me? So it's hard for me to understand where that separateness happened.
Thus, we see that you are immersed in this work today. So I guess in looking at that immersion of everything that you believe, the interconnectedness, as the Pope, as late Pope Francis called it, integral ecology, everything is connected. Tell us a little bit about this connectivity between faith and community and care for creation.
Yes, I'm going to answer this in maybe an interesting way. So it's almost like from a place of curiosity and not understanding at first. So again, growing up in the Christian tradition, I knew about the Beatitudes. I think we actually talked about this a little bit when we met, and I knew that, the meek shall inherit the earth, and the peacemakers shall be called the children of God. And I've heard the stories of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples before the crucifixion. But I didn't actually see a lot of evidence of that, like in the world that I was in. So as I feel like I'm a seeker, so I just love learning about different religions and different texts. And I started to really see some examples of service leadership that were beyond the Bible, like that actually were happening in present time. I saw the Dalai Lama in Boston, I think it was in the late 90s. And I was like, oh, this is what spirit leadership looks like. This is what service leadership looks like. There was like a humility there in his presence. I'm like, that is what those scriptures were talking about. And I'd always been interested in environmental things, but it felt very much kind of like an us versus them dynamic in a way, or proving them right, or trying to convince people of the science. But I started to all the pieces started to fit into place when I'm asked the question, how can I be of service here? What can I offer? God is giving me this on my heart that I cry at clear cuts and I'm upset about environmental justice. So what does this look like to step into service and show up in that way?
All right. So tell us the details of that aha moment when it just hit, when you got to that intersection of faith and sustainability.
Yeah. And I think I always had that feeling of responsibility from my faith in that alignment that I spoke about, that our thoughts and words and actions, it all mattered. But I think where it came in sustainability, actually, I do know one of the moments. I can remember I had young children. I was a mom. I was literally in my hallway and I was carrying a basket of laundry. And I recently watched An Inconvenient Truth. And again, like I said, I've always been interested in environmental issues, but I didn't really know where to plug in. But I was just compelled, all of a sudden, I just said, God, if this is my life, thank you. Thank you. I'm so blessed. Thank you so much. But if there is something more that you want from me, I am listening. And then from there.
Did he answer? Did he answer?
Did you get an answer?
You were listening. What did he say? What did you hear?
I was listening. Yeah, I was in Atlanta at the time, and that week, my husband and I had a rare date, and I had opened one of the free magazines in a coffee shop, and I saw the ad for Unity Church. I'm like, I need to go there. Again, I grew up in Christian Science, which is connected to Unity. Cross-pollination around the same time, but I didn't really know about it. And I went there, I was like, oh, this is the spiritual community I was looking for. And then someone, within, I don't know, a few weeks of being there, someone was starting a kind of a class on spiritual business and how we show up in the world. And so all the learnings that I got there, and again, kind of going back to that humility piece about learning that it's not the model of the doing and having and being, but that we actually start with the being. We start there, and what is God asking me to do? And then I really did start an adventure of sustainability. I did start an eco business back in I don't know, I guess it was 2007, before people were really talking about that, especially here in the South. And it was kind of about the hows, how do people do sustainability? And I did that for about 7 years. And then, by then we went from people not knowing what it meant to be green to then talking about, oh, that company's greenwashing. So, yeah.
Okay. So you've made it through this process, and then you dove kind of deep in your studies. Tell us a little bit about your study of biomimicry.
Yes. So this actually happened. I'd heard about biomimicry for a number of years. I saw it in a film, and I was always curious. But, there's always later, right? You can always do something at another time. And then COVID happened, and I was like, well, maybe there's not another time. Maybe the time is now. I really, you have to change. If you want things to change, you need to change things. So I decided to enroll at Arizona State University for a Master's of Science in Biomimicry. And I knew I would not finish the program until I was 50 or so, but I was like, I'm doing this anyway. But biomimicry, the definition is a conscious emulation of life's genius, or on this podcast, we could say the conscious emulation of God's genius. Another way to think about it is it's innovation inspired by nature. And it's grounded, again, in that humility piece that I keep coming back to. It's not saying, oh, what can we extract from nature? Or, what can we take? It's like, what can we learn from nature? It's seeing nature not as commodity, but as model and mentor and measure.
Such as, give us an example in real life. How are we mimicking nature?
I like nature's genius. I like that.
Well, so I will just say it's interesting that we kind of have this story in our culture of survival of the fittest. Like we think it's power over and it's win or lose, but actually that's not how nature works. Nature is, when it's stressful, you're likely to see organisms work together. There's a lot more mutualism. So if you go to asknature.org, there's like examples of hundreds of species who work together. But we are talking about, I do coastal resilience, right? So in nature, when there's a flooding event, ants end up hooking up to each other and forming like a life raft, which saves them all so they don't drown. And so like, there's just one example of how nature works together, but there's many, many examples. And I think that's something, that we do as faith communities. How do we perform mutual aid? How do we do this work in community? Kind of more an example close to home, the gopher tortoise at the Okefenokee Swamp is known for digging these stable burrows all through the swamp. So when there's a fire, it actually becomes refuge for so many different species so that they can survive the flames. So yeah, just a few quick examples.
Okay, let's move to your title, Coastal Outreach and Resiliency Coordinator for GIPL. What is that?
Well, the fun thing is I get to do a little bit of everything. So I work with our programs team. We have a green team, so we help to organize groups who do start to feel this ethic and call to care for creation, thinking, what can we do, whether it's an energy audit or possibly solar or a zero waste audit. And we also do, as I mentioned, so we will actually come in and do energy audit so that we can help you cut carbon emissions and also your power bills. We do a lot of advocacy work. So that's the outreach part. And the coastal resiliency part, we are working on developing a resilience hub program so that faith communities who want to and are equipped to help not only respond when a disaster hits, but also work year-round on preparedness.
So tell us a little bit more about a resiliency hub, especially a faith-based resiliency hub, and how that has to do with nature and sustainability. Where did those two come together?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So it actually came when I was on a biomimicry retreat out in North Cascades. We did some learning, and one of the things we talked about was the adaptive cycle in nature. And that's the idea. If you kind of maybe think about a forest, you have the meadow and then you have those fast growing species. It ends up becoming more of a forest over time. And then in that forest, it enters a conservation phase, which you think is a good thing, but it actually means like now there's just a lot of resources that are stuck and tied up. And inevitably there's some sort of release. Generally, like in a forest, it would be a fire, and then it cycles back up to a new growth phase. But what happens in that growth phase is what comes up is what was already in the soil, what was planted. Maybe it's like a jack pine seed that only opens up with the heat of stress and the heat of fire. So I thought about that, and I thought about faith communities and like we know these disruptions are coming, especially on the coast. How can we get ahead? Like we know that's going to happen. So what can we plant now to help communities not only bounce back, but maybe even bounce forward?
Okay. Well, we're so much information in so little time. What gives you hope right now? You're a positive person. What gives you hope? Share it with us.
Oh, I'm glad you can tell that. A few things. One is I'll just say, the only constant is change. That definitely gives me hope. We know that this too shall pass. And being open to the mystery and the curiosity of all and the gratitude that we get to live in this time where our actions really do matter. And then the other thing I'll say is more of a nature answer based on systems and synergies in a system. And when they come together, they form something called emergent properties. So a common example is like, who knew that when hydrogen and oxygen mixed, it would cause water? So that gives me hope, because like when we work with our community and we link arms, like we don't know what can emerge from that. But it's worth leaning in and doing that and being open to that possibility.
So a lot of your work is this whole idea of listening to nature and trying to use what you learn to help make our communities stronger and better and more resistant to some of these things like climate change. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing around climate change and the communities you're working with and what they're doing around climate change?
Yes. So on the coast, we have at least 6 churches who are somewhere in the process of installing solar. We have a few in Statesboro who already have it on. Trinity Episcopal has it. It's in a beautiful cross shape on the roof. And the Unitarian Church there in Statesboro. And then in Savannah, Asbury Memorial is getting it on as we speak. And then there's a few other churches that are somewhere in the mix. So that is certainly a way to cut their carbon footprint, and they are absolutely doing that. We also see Trinity's another one, but other churches as well are doing food gardens, food forests, orchards, planting trees. We have a new rewilding program at Georgia Interfaith Power and Light where we will be working to plant trees on the property of different congregations and in communities.
Okay. Well, Beth, give us a call to action and your contact information.
Okay, my call to action for people is, I think, we're often told to follow our bliss or follow our passion, and that's where we're meant to plug in. But I'm going to ask you to look at where your heart is breaking for the world, because it's not always our passion that directs us. A lot of times it's our compassion. So that hurt that we might be feeling, I think that's how the world is calling you to be a part of its healing.
And how do we get in touch with you?
Yes.
So if you go to GIPL.org, you will find all that we are fun things we are doing at Georgia Interfaith Power and Light and events. And if you are in Savannah or Brunswick or anywhere along the coast, you can email me directly. It's beth@gipl.org. And I'd be happy to come meet with you and see what we can do together.
That sounds great. Thanks for offering us that information. I think the other thing that I would love for people to know about you, and in this final minute, maybe you can just give us a brief sentence, is a little bit about the work that reconnects and healing the disconnect.
Yes. So I am a facilitator for the work that reconnects, and in many faith communities, I teach this you'll see it called Active Hope, which is the title of one of her books. It is a process of group work, so it is not meant to be done alone. It is meant to be done in community, and it follows a spiral, kind of what I just alluded to about paying attention to our pain for the world. It actually starts, we ground in gratitude, like many faith traditions, and there are some practices around that. And then we do take some time to share what is on our hearts, what is going on in the world today, and how are we feeling about that? And that's not something I tell you. That's an experience. That's your experience, and that you'll be sharing with a small group or with a partner. And then from there, the spiral goes into the third part called seeing with new and ancient eyes. Ancient because we're recognizing that this view of interconnectedness is Indigenous people around the world have known this for centuries. So honoring that. But there are practices just to see things a little differently, use our moral imagination, lean into the vision of what we want to see. And then from there, there's a going forth piece. So it's, where are you feeling called to participate? Again, we don't come with a to-do list or a checklist or, by the way, going to GIPL. Like, we don't do that. It's really like, what is your inner response and how are you feeling called to be of service in the world?
I love this, Leonard. What a great place to end today. This feeling of hope, this reconnection, as again, Pope Francis talked about, that interconnectedness.
Yeah, Beth, on this show, we pride ourselves on giving information and confirmation, and you gave us both. So thank you very, very much, and good luck. And hey, don't make this the last time you meet us at the intersection of faith and sustainability.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, stay connected with us on social media and share your journey with the hashtag faith and sustainability.
And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. We would love to hear your comments, so be sure to send us those. So I guess until next time, Leonard, we'll meet you
at the intersection of faith and sustainability.
The preceding podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Atlanta. Copyright 2025.